Colombia, citizens will head to the polls on May 29th to elect a new president and vice president. Russian President Vladimir Putin reiterated to the leaders of France and Germany his readiness to resume the dialogue with Ukraine. More than 30 people were killed and others injured when a stampede broke out at a church event in the southeastern Nigerian city of Port Harcourt. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. In Colombia, citizens head to the polls on May 29th to elect a new president amid one of the greatest social and political crises in its modern history. 6 candidates are facing for the presidency in a country plagued by the economic fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic, social unrest, and a deteriorating security situation. On Sunday, about 39 million electorate will cast their ballots in the first round of voting. If none of the candidates win by an absolute majority, it will go to a runoff vote slated for June 19th. The United Nations organization from Colombia remarked that it hopes that the political rights of citizens and their representatives, as well as the principles of transparency, accountability, and the rule of law will be guaranteed in Sunday's presidential elections. In Colombia, the defender of the people, Carlos Camargo, the ombudsman, reported pressures on voters during the presidential elections. The institution announced an operational plan to provide security for the process. The official explained that the Directorate for Attention and Processing of Complaints of the Attorney General's office has received reports of coercion to eligible citizens to vote by irregular armed groups to favor certain candidacy, and urged not to be intimidated by these actions. In several regions of the country, there have been reported pamphlets and massive telephone messages with threats. The Defender's Office will deploy 3,000 officials to monitor the risk sites identified, especially in Antioquia, Arauca, Cauca, Chocó, the sub-region of Bajo Cauca, southern Córdoba, and southern Bolívar. Now we move on to other topics. On Friday, Latin American and Caribbean heads of state, as well as top officials, held the 21st Summit of the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America People's Trade Treaty, ALBA TCP, in Havana. Cuba's President Miguel Díaz-Canel rejected the U.S. interference in Cuba's internal affairs and its deceitful maneuvers to divide Latin America. The President of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros, recalled ALBA's achievements in terms of regional cooperation in several fields under an equality premise. Other heads of state and top officials of member states also demanded a fair U.S. policy towards the region, especially Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, as well as condemned these nations' exclusion from the Summit of the Americas. Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel made the opening remarks at the 21st Summit of the Bolivarian Alternative for the Peoples for the Americas, held this Friday in Havana, Cuba. He recalled that ALBA, created by Cuba and Venezuela, sprung as a historical need from ideas of Bolívar and José Martí on revolutionary solidarity. Díaz-Canel also said that COVID-19 pandemic put all our countries to the test.
It is a united Latin America with a proper voice and articulated in the coordination of development and the defense of sovereignty appears to be essential. If we are fragmented, we can be ignored, but together no one can silence us. The development and potentials of the pharmaceutical industry in Cuba, which is a legacy of Fidel Castro, has enabled us to produce 3 vaccines with high levels of effectiveness.
During his speech, President Maduro also spoke of new and better times ahead for the countries of the region, thanks to the unity presented by the ALBA TCP member states. He also expressed that the sovereignty of the peoples must be respected.
And better times are approaching. New and better times come for the countries of the Caribbean and Latin America. And these times will arrive and will appear from these battles that we wage right here, because we want our continent to be respected, because our countries need to be respected.
Bolivia's President Luis Arce denounced the exclusion of Cuba, Nicaragua and Venezuela from the Summit of the Americas and called for the unity of all countries of the region to face the current and future challenges of humanity.
Sustainable future for our America will depend in the ability for us to come together to face the great challenges that humanity faces: poverty, hunger, disequality, economic crisis, the great gap between rich and poor, sparked by a system that prioritizes the reproduction and production of capital before the reproduction of life, and is also creating a climate collapse without a point of return.
During his speech at the 21st Summit of the Heads of State and Government of the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America People's Trade Treaty, Nicaraguan President Daniel Ortega highlighted the essences of imperialism.
Imperialism has not changed. The essence of imperialism is there. Their essence is totally criminal. There are no frontiers for them. And in the meantime, they think that the time has come for establishing total hegemony of the American imperialism in the whole world.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. On Friday, President of Honduras, Xiomara Castro, confirmed that she had a telephone conversation with the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, in which she ratified her expectations that all the countries of the Americas are invited to the summit. The head of state confirmed that during the conversation, they discussed issues related to cooperation between the two nations and updated matters discussed at their meeting on January 27th regarding the measures that Castro's government has taken in the Central American nation. During the conversation, the Honduran president ratified to the U.S. vice president her government's position regarding the attendance of all countries of the region to the Summit of the Americas, scheduled to be held in the city of Los Angeles. The National Assembly of Venezuela appointed a special commission to investigate the statements made by the former U.S. Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, about the invasion attempts to the South American country. Pedro Infante, deputy of the National Assembly, informed that additionally those proposals that were passed by the then National Assembly in contempt in the 2016 to 2021 legislative period will be investigated. They will also establish a systematic process and determine responsibilities so that the country can rely on the truthfulness at the national and international levels about the invasion that, according to the former U.S. Secretary of Defense, was attempted against Venezuela. On Friday, Argentinian health authorities confirmed the detection of the second confirmed cases of monkeypox. The Ministry of Health reported a second case of the disease in a Spanish citizen who was visiting the country, stating that there is no link with the first case detected. In this context, Ecuador and Bolivia registered respectively one suspected case of monkeypox. At the same time, health officials from both countries are waiting for the results of the detection tests. The WHO said that the two cases in Argentina are added to the 379 cases registered in the world. And the government of Guatemala announced that it will request the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, to cease these operations in the Central American nation. The president of Guatemala, Alejandro Giammattei, denounced the alleged plans of the government of Washington to remove him. The president pointed out that the Biden's administration wants to introduce a multicultural agenda to the country, which he catalogued as indigenism. In this context, Giammattei demanded the exit of the USAID for its interference in the internal affairs of the nation. The relationship between the two countries deteriorated after the re-election of the Attorney General Consuelo Porras by Giammattei's decision. Porras was sanctioned in September 2021 by the U.S., accused of obstructing justice in high-impact cases on the country. In Peru, leftist organizations denounced being victims of harassment by the National Directorate of Intelligence of the Ministry of the Interior. After a group of hackers managed to enter the computer system of the National Directorate of Intelligence of the Ministry of the Interior, it was discovered that the agency was monitoring several political leaders under suspicion of being terrorists. According to the data collected, these espionage actions were carried out on March 27, 2022, in relation to the first meeting of left-wing organizations. Specialists and leftist activists warned about the seriousness of this type of state intelligence operations, which includes government institutions.
What we have to say is that this goes beyond anything we could have imagined, because this does not only deal with leftist organizations, as we already suspected. In this information from the Intelligence Director of the Ministry of the Interior, there are public entities included. There are even spaces within the government itself, within the Ministry of Justice, the Division of Missing Persons, the Office of the People's Defender for activities that dealt precisely with the rights of the victims of the armed conflict, for example.
Former Peruvian congressperson and lawyer from Peru's Legal Defense Institute, Carlos Rivera, referred to the possible consequences of this type of intelligence operations against political organizations in the country.
The consequences this could have, right? Because let's say that the intelligence agencies prepare information, gather intelligence for some executive or political body to make decisions. They don't do it because it's their hobby. They do it because it is an important part of a more executive task. And here is where I am much more concerned, because this could mean some kind of legal act of repression on those people who are part of, lead or participate in this type of organizations.
Now we move on to other topics. Russian President Vladimir Putin reiterated to the leaders of France and Germany his readiness to resume the dialogue with Ukraine. The Russian president held a telephone conversation with his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron and the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, in which they exchanged views focused on efforts to resolve the situation in Ukraine. During the telephone contact, Macron and Scholz urged the Russian president to have direct and serious negotiations with Ukraine and to seek a diplomatic solution to the conflict. Putin recalled that negotiations are frozen on the Kiev side. Meanwhile, he reiterated Moscow's readiness to continue negotiations, while warning about the dangers of providing Ukraine with Western weapons. Russian ambassador to the United States, Anatoly Antonov, urged the U.S. President Joe Biden to dismiss the idea of delivering long-range ballistic missiles to the Ukrainian government. The statements by Moscow's diplomatic representative in the U.S. Capitol came in response to information published in the media claiming the White House had decided to supply Kiev with multiple rocket launchers. The Russian official emphasized that this information needs to be carefully verified. However, he recalled that Moscow has repeatedly warned Washington that such actions significantly increase the risk of an escalation of the conflict and hinder the prospects for peace between Russia and Ukraine. In this regard, he called on the U.S. government to put an end to shipping weapons to that country. And Russian Agriculture Minister Dmitry Patrushev announced on Friday that they will export around 50 million tons of grain from the 2022-2023 agricultural season. According to his statements, they expect this year's crop to exceed last year's. They also expect, based on these projections, that grain exports for the 2021-2022 agricultural season will exceed 37 million tons, thus reaching record levels. Last year, the country achieved a production of more than 120 million tons of grain, including nearly 76 million tons of wheat. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. And we are back. More than 30 people were killed and others injured when a stampede broke out at a church event in southeastern Nigerian city of Port Harcourt on Saturday, according to police and security officials. According to a regional spokesperson for Nigeria's Civil Defense Corps, the incident took place at the Port Harcourt Polo Club, the venue of the annual Shop for Free charity program organized by the King's Assembly Pentecostal Church. The drive had not yet started when the stampede took place. The crowd forced their way into the venue despite the fact that the gate was closed, resulting in the deadly charge. A police spokesperson said an investigation has been launched and a report will be released in due course. African leaders met on Saturday to discuss efforts to fight a growing extremist threat and push back against a recent round of military coups on the continent. The Summit on Terrorism and Unconstitutional Change is organized by the African Union and is being hosted in Malabo, the capital of Equatorial Guinea. Delegations and delegates listened to the addresses as Saturday's opening ceremony was addressed by President Obiang, Angola's president, and by chairperson of African Union Commission Musa Faki Mohammed. After progress at promoting democracy, Africa has seen recent coups in Mali, Burkina Faso and Guinea, and military rule in Chad. A host of terror groups operate across many countries, including the Islamic State group, Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab, and Boko Haram. Mohammed called on the African nations to make better use of their own troops in combating the terror threat facing Africa, and so reduce any dependency on forces from other continents.
While we have the means and the men necessary, African armies count, according to certain recent estimates of 2022, some 2.7 million men. Mobilizing just 1 or 2% of this force would give us the means necessary to reduce our dependence on foreign forces and to have a chance of success against terrorism.
The United States targeted 2 Russian banks as part of new sanctions over alleged support of North Korea and its nuclear and ballistic missile programs. The sanctions came after what the U.S. said were 3 new ballistic missiles launched by North Korea on Tuesday, including 1 intercontinental ballistic missile. The launches happened after President Joe Biden ended an Asian trip in which he stressed Washington's commitment to defending allies from the North nuclear threat. The U.S. said this week's launches brought North Korea's total for this year to 23, as the country pushes to develop and expand the range of its nuclear and missile programs. Friday's sanctions targets included 2 Russian banks, Far Eastern and Sputnik, accused of doing business with the U.S.-sanctioned North Korean entities. And the food crisis has begun to reach its most pressing peak. World wheat stocks will be exhausted in 10 weeks, according to a UN report. Sarah Menker, director for the analytics firm Grow Intelligence, presented a report to the UN Security Council warning about the complex situation of the food crisis. The causes, she had said, are not just the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, but also the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, disruption of the supply chain, and extreme natural events. David Beasley, executive director of the United Nations World Food Programme, echoed the alarms raised by Sarah Menker, adding that the crisis is already leading to serious protests and unrest in countries such as Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Pakistan, and Peru. Now we address other topics. Continuous torrential rains cause floods and trigger landslides on Thursday and Friday in South China's Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region and in East China's Fujian province. The rain raised the water level in the Qiangyang River in the city of Guangxi's Guipin. To ensure flood control, a total of 21 sluice gates were opened and local Marine Bureau has implemented temporary water traffic control to prevent dangerous situations. The torrential rain also triggered a landslide in Wuping County in the Fujian's Longyang city on Friday, causing the collapse of a plant and burying some people at the scene. Rescue efforts are still going on. So we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For Telesur English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.